Dear Axel, welcome back to our interview. How does a typical investment year of yours look like?
Thanks for having me again. And my job consists of two parts. One is sitting in my desk, reading back in San Diego and being pretty antisocial, not meeting with many people, not talking with many people, reading annual reports, reading papers, and watching stocks go up and down. But I do travel to the countries that I invest in. I do try to meet with every single company that I invest in. And so I'm traveling last year in 2018, I was traveling for 3 months of the year. I try to meet with about 100 companies, 100 management teams a year. And I've been last year in about 25 countries, which is a little bit more countries than normal.
How do you select the countries?
A few things. First, if I have investments in the country, I want to go there again, meet with the management, shake hands, see if everything's going as it was the year before. Secondly, I'm trying to find countries that have done poorly, where the stock market is down, and I hope to find investment opportunities there. And lastly, each year I try to force myself to see one or two countries that I've not been before, just to expand my horizon and put everything in context, put another little puzzle of the world in there and trying to understand how this planet works.
Which countries are not that interesting to travel there again? Like, where didn't you find value?
Value comes and goes. I mean, for example, my favorite country to travel to is Vietnam. Very fascinating, fast-growing economy, and the food is great, and it's a great place to see. Having said that, there was a period of 7-8 years where I never went there because stocks were not cheap enough. Or before that, I've not been in Russia for the longest time, and then the oil prices fell, the ruble fell, and Russian stocks became very attractive, and then I found myself to go there once or twice per year. So it depends. And the fund in general say, what's the favorite market that you're in, and it just always depends on price. So 1 year might be 30% of the portfolio might be in Vietnam or in Russia, and 2 years later it's none. And it's not that I like Russia anymore or any less, or Vietnam or whatever country, it's just prices become attractive and then they become unattractive again, and then you rotate into something where you see more upside opportunity.
On what criteria do you select your traveling plans, or when does something scream to you as cheap? Or
I look for crisis. I'm the master of disaster. When the country is in the news for all the wrong reasons, that's when I'm getting interested. That's when I look for stocks, and that's when there's the biggest opportunities to find something. When the news is great, the sun is shining, everybody loves it, and there's 5 different conferences each year by every investment bank in Moscow, it's probably a bad time to invest there because stocks are dear. So I want to go there when the last conference is cancelled and nobody else wants to go there.
You're investing since 15 years by your fund, and you experienced the financial crisis. How was it for your countries?
Financial crisis, I think for all of us who lived through it, survived it, was extremely painful. That it includes me, the fund. Despite being value and all that stuff and being great companies, it dropped 50% and stocks became cheaper than I could have ever imagined. Was the most painful period of my life. And the stock markets collapsed, the currencies collapsed, but the countries actually did quite well. I mean, most of those countries did not experience a recession, but the stock market still did do poorly because of foreign investments, because people were selling, they just needed liquidity, and whether they got that from New York, London, or Nairobi, they didn't care.
When you're in a country, you've selected certain sectors you're mostly interested in. Can you name the sectors, please?
I used to say BBC, bank, beers and cigarettes, though I had to promise my wife I won't say that because she said it's bad sectors and I shouldn't, so maybe I call it bank, beers and cement or so. I'm believing the world is getting a better place. I believe there's a middle class growing in countries where there was not one, and those are people who are going to have their first checking account. It used to say their first cell phone, now everybody's got a cell phone, but many countries, poor countries, cigarettes, for example, were sold by the stick, one cigarette at a time. Now people got money, they can buy 5 cigarettes or a whole pack of cigarettes, and it becomes better and wealthier, and people have money to wash their hands with soap, and they're going to use those products, and they get electricity with that refrigeration, and they can drink milk that they couldn't before when they just had milk powder. So despite everything, all the bad news that one hears one reads the papers about wars and crisis and disasters, I think it's just noise. The world is getting better, richer every day with very few exceptions, and it's just that these days we're still used to good news. In general, that we can't tolerate wars between countries, which used to be the norm, but now it just doesn't happen anymore. I mean, Ethiopia was, in the 80s, the basket case, the place of mass starvation, and now the fastest growing economy in Africa. So and it's doing very well managed, and it's just distant past. But people still think about those old pictures when they think about those countries. And that's why it pays off to go and see and visit the countries and see that they're doing well, and come back again a few years later and see them changed.
And try to sum it up. So you're looking for countries that are growing, and you want to invest in the services and the goods the emerging middle class wants to consume?
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you. If you look at the typical meeting you have in these countries, how do you get in contact with the companies, and how do the meetings play out?
The meetings get organized by somebody else. So I find companies that seem to be cheap on paper, or I screen screens on Bloomberg, I read annual reports, I look through past performance of the operation, and everything seems to be checking out that I got what looks like a good company trading at an attractive price. Then I would call my broker in New York, Auerbach Grayson, which gives me access to the entire planet, and tell them, hey, I'm just seeing those 5 cheap stocks in country A, whatever it's called. And I said, please organize meetings for me with those 5 companies next month. And while you're at it, since I'm flying around the world, I want to see everybody else as well. And then they will organize me meetings with all the listed companies that are there, that are available. And I'm going to see everybody and see if I want to hear many different stories. Because I just go there, see one company, they're going to tell me everything's going to be great. So I want to talk to the bartender, I want to talk to the taxi driver, and I want to talk to the competitors and just get confirmation to get a more complete picture.
So you get as much information as you can get in the countries you're visiting.
Well, sure. I'm curious and I want to understand it a little bit better, yeah. And I mean, it's quite amazing actually in those small countries how much one can learn in a short period of time if you talk to a lot of people, right? I mean, you can, because you're not on vacation, you're not on the beach where you just order beers, but you're actually talking to the executive teams, the CEO, the CFOs of large companies. You see the local politicians at the bar of the Hyatt in the evening, and you talk to them, and you meet with somebody from the central bank, and you see the factories and talk to the workers there. So you get a fairly accurate picture without often being too disappointed there. That too often I don't get it wrong, and that's why I don't invest in China or in India, because there I could spend 10 years, I still have no clue what's going on.
How do you deal with the language barrier?
You know, everybody speaks better English than I do. Or in Africa, it's English everywhere. In Latin America, all the management teams, everybody's educated in London and New York. And a few places where it's tough, where you need 10 translators, and which can result in frustration, is some Asian countries. Japan, Korea, Vietnam, especially the government-owned entities, they're the management, they're old school, they are not educated in the US or Europe. And yeah, Korea, Japan, but Philippines and Indonesia, everybody speaks English. So English seems to be pretty good language, and annual reports many times as well in English or bilingual.
Are there any groups or sources you get the information with the most worth by?
Yeah, I mean, it's the CEO, the CFO of the companies. I mean, they tell you the longer term plans, their strategies, and just whether it's plausible that the profits they made in the past are going to be this similar or higher in the future or not. And so you talk to them about what the vision is. They say, oh, I'm very optimistic, but then they're not investing, and probably maybe they're not so optimistic as they say. So you want to say, okay, where do you put your own money? Do you own shares? What are your expansion plans? What's the competition? And again, after getting all this and getting somewhat of an understanding about the business, and it's typically simple businesses, then you talk to the competitors and ask them and verify, and talk to the people, to the little street traders, and ask them, how's business? How are you doing? To verify.
What questions are in your checklist to talk with management?
Capital allocation is probably a big one. You make money, what do you do with it? And it can be anything from business is great, we're going to build a new factory, to business is not so great, but we make the money, we pay dividends, which is fine with me. To a lot of times happening in some crazy places, especially in Vietnam, say, oh, business is great, but the real estate market is doing great, so we're going to become real estate developers now, and then I know it's time to run if everybody starts to think they're the next Donald Trump real estate developers, and it always ends in a disaster, because inevitably, if you're making soap, you might not know that much about building high-rises.
Are there any conferences on emerging markets you can recommend?
Yes, I mean, there are many conferences. There's one for Eastern Europe, put on by Erste Bank each year in September in Stegersbach. But a lot of times when there's a conference, it probably means there's a lot of interest already in the market, and it's probably the wrong time to invest. And the smaller companies typically don't come to them. It's companies the larger ones that have investor relations departments, and they have a story to tell. So I'd rather prefer go there, have the inconvenience, and fly to Indonesia and spend countless hours in the traffic in Jakarta and meet with a company that will not bother coming to New York. I think you need to do that.
That's a good information. Based on the information you gave in our interviews, it would be quite interesting for some of our listeners maybe to do similar, invest like you in some emerging market companies. Is there anything they could easily do, or how could you invest in Indonesia, for example, or in Cambodia?
It's not easy. No, it's not easy. And that's why I'm doing it, because a lot of people don't want to bother with it. They don't want to bother flying to Jakarta, and they don't want to bother having to translate open accounts and translate currencies, all things. They'd rather buy ADRs in New York or London. But those stocks are much more expensive because they're easy to invest in, and they're therefore more competitively priced, more efficiently priced. So my wife always used to laugh whenever we visit a new country that we'd always go to a bank and open a bank account, because I wanted to invest in the stock exchange. So I'd say for individual investors, just have some fun and don't do your vacation in Spain, but go to Tel Aviv or go to Cairo or wherever you want to go and open a bank account and transfer the money and buy stocks on the local stock exchange. And it's for individuals, typically the process is very, very simple, and typically you get your money back with a nice return.
Thank you very much for the interview.
Okay.